After the mother, it was the gallery reserved for women to attend Mass. Women were not supposed to attend Mass down here together with men. They had to be in a separate area closer to God, in an upper position. In Portugal, we only had 3 cathedrals that had this gallery built. The first one was Coimbra, the second one was here in Lisbon. So Coimbra is further north. It was the first capital of Portugal before Lisbon. Then Lisbon, and then further south in a city called Évora. And after that, no other cathedral had this gallery built because actually we were not using them. So there was no point on building the gallery for women. So the fact is that the church follows the rules of French churches, because the architects that conceived the plans for the construction of the church in the Cathedral of Lisbon were Bernard and Robert, architects that had came from France and introduced exactly the same kind of principles of the French cathedrals. Although here they adapted to the reality of this country because it needed to be more sturdy to defend the penitents that would seek refuge in here. Just come to this side and take a seat if you wish, please. So you can take a seat if you wish. So behind me we have one of the towers of the cathedral, and it's at the base of this tower that we have the baptistry of the cathedral, still in use today. But this is the place where Saint Anthony was baptized. As I told you, his family name was Bulhões. It was a very important and powerful family. It was a little bit like Saint Francis of Assisi. He was also from a rich family, and Saint Anthony was exactly also the same case. He was from a rich family and very powerful and influential family in Lisbon, and that was the reason why their house was right next door to the cathedral. It was not everybody that could have their house right next to the cathedral, the most important building in the city. And in between the cathedral and the town hall, the 2 structures that would represent power, administration, and the church. Okay, so they were the most important buildings in the city of Lisbon. So the baptismal fountain where he was baptized no longer exists, because with the earthquake, this tower suffered several damages. Okay, it was rebuilt after that. The baptismal fountain fell off, it was broken, and it was replaced by the one we see today, made out of marble in the 18th century. But the location is this one. Inside the baptismal chapel, we have beautiful tile decorations, the blue and white tiles. These ones date from the late 17th century. And the interesting thing about these tiles is that on the lower section we have decorations that will be more appropriated to a palace, not so much to a church, but it was common to have religious decorations in palaces and non-religious decorations inside the churches. It was very common sometimes in the 17th and 18th century. The blue and white is also very common from a period that goes from the second half of the 17th century and all along the 18th century, because it started to be produced in a time in which Portugal had lost its independence, as I told you, between 1580 and 1640. And one of the things that the Spaniards did was to forbade Portuguese to use deluxe items. But for us Portuguese, Chinese porcelains, like silks or imported rugs or many other things, were not considered to be deluxe items, but they were things of the day-to-day life of the people. They were so basic, so needed that we could not survive without them. And the first thing that the Spaniards did when we lost our independence was precisely to forbid the import of what they consider deluxe goods. And Portuguese could not think of having their life without those items. So what we did was actually to figure out a way to create the illusion that nothing had changed. We were always big producers of tiles. Tiles are part of the most important elements of the decorative arts of Portugal. So in a glazed surface that would look like porcelain, we started producing the blue and white to imitate the most appreciated blue and white Chinese porcelain. So like that, we still had the illusion that things hadn't changed, that we still had our porcelain around in our day-to-day life. In the upper section, we have on the right-hand side the baptism of Christ by St. John the Baptist, and on the left-hand side we have the representation of one of the many miracles attributed to St. Anthony. He is over there preaching to the fish in Rimini, Italy, and story says that, he was trying to pass a message to the local people, and no one cared. No one wanted to listen to what St. Anthony had to say. So he said, if you don't want to listen, I'm going to talk to the fish. I'm sure they will pay attention to all my words. So he went close to the river, he started talking to the fish, and the legend says that all the fish came out of the water with their heads outside the water, listening very carefully to the words of St. Anthony. And when the people saw that, they were so curious that they all approached to listen to what St. Anthony had to say also. So this is in Portugal maybe one of the most spoken miracles of St. Anthony, and we have numerous representations of this miracle in different places, including inside the baptismal chapel of the cathedral. It was up there in the upper choir that St. Anthony started as a young member of the choir of Lisbon Cathedral. He used to sing up there. And some do say that actually it was up there that he performed maybe what was considered as his first miracle, because when he touched a stone, there was a cross that appeared on that stone. That area is not open to the public. I never saw it, honestly, but the church and the Cathedral of Lisbon and the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon does say that the cross is there. Okay, so it is considered to be one of the first miracles attributed to Saint Anthony while he was still very young, because don't forget that at the age of 6 he takes the decision of entering the Church of Saint Vincent. He chose the patron saint of Lisbon, and later on, a few years later, he moved to Coimbra. And as I told you before, Lisbon was the first capital of Portugal, and the Augustinian monastery of the Holy Cross, Santa Cruz, was the most important Augustinian structure in Portugal. And that was the reason why he moved to Coimbra. And it was in Coimbra that he took the decision of changing his life. Because one day, on that church, they received some of the relics of the Saint Martyrs of Morocco, a group of Franciscans that had left to Morocco to preach the word of God, to convert the local people, and they were all killed. Crucified, beheaded, they cut their throats, they all died. And the relics of those saints were brought back to Europe, and they were distributed and scattered in numerous monasteries and convents. And some end up in the monastery where St. Anthony was studying. He was so impressed by the story of those men that he decided to go to Morocco and start all over again what the Franciscans had tried to do. But the moment he got to Morocco, he was sick. He was so sick that he had to come back to Portugal. So the boat that brought him back to Portugal, it was not his fate actually, was diverted by a big storm into Sicily, okay, in the Mediterranean. And he had suffered so much during this journey in the Mediterranean that he decided to come back to Portugal by land, by coming across Italy, then France, Spain, and Portugal. And it was while he was going across Italy that he met St. Francis of Assisi. And that was the moment in which he decided for good to become a Franciscan. He was thinking already of changing the religious order. So he did change, he became the Franciscan that we all know. He adopted the Franciscan name of Anthony, and then he stayed until he died in Italy. So basically, we are talking about the same man and two very distinct periods of his life. First as an Augustinian in Portugal, the second phase of his life, the most famous one, as a Franciscan in Italy, where he ended up by dying. But now you understand why we keep calling him St. Anthony of Lisbon, It's the same man, same premises, but different religious order. And it's common to see Saint Anthony in Portugal dressed as an Augustinian, okay, in black and white, which for most of the people it's a very strange and awkward thing, right? Because you're never used to see Saint Anthony dressed in a different thing, always as a Franciscan. Okay, so up there, like inside the chapel that we have next to us, we have some beautiful silk Indian rugs on the walls. They date from the 18th century, and actually we do have normally a very mild climate. It never gets that cold, it never gets that hot, although temperatures are increasing in these last years. But the fact is that we have warmer temperatures than in many other places. We have a mixture of the influence of the Mediterranean climate with an Atlantic climate, and that does provide us a very mild climate and temperature. And therefore, the traditional tapestry, the one made of wool, was not the best and the most logical thing for us Portuguese to hang on a wall. And in our former colonies in India, we had these important productions of silk. Silk bed covers that were embroidered by hand, but especially the silk rugs that we thought would be much more useful, not on the floor, because on the floor we use a lot of ceramic and stone to create a cooler atmosphere, but hanging on the walls to give a nice decoration and a cooler atmosphere into the places. And that's the reason why, instead of seeing these rugs on the floor like they have been produced, it's very common in Portugal to find them replacing the traditional woolen tapestries hanging on the walls. Okay? So if you just want to look around and go inside that, and then we are continuing straight around the direction of the church. Okay? Lots of people get married the day of St. Anthony on the 13th of June. And he also helps us to find lost things. Okay? So we have a special prayer that we have to pray. And believe me, it works. Whenever we lose something, we pray to St. Anthony and we find what we lost. There's an interesting story of a lady that wanted to combine both aspects of St. Anthony as the patron saint of fiancés and the one that helps us to find lost items. So every day she prayed in front of the statue of St. Anthony, asking for a husband. She wanted to find a husband. Not that she had lost it, but she wanted to find a husband. And the time went by and no husband appeared, so one day she was so furious with St. Anthony that she grabbed the statue of St. Anthony and she threw the statue out of the window. And the statue fell off on the head of a gentleman that was passing by on the street, that obviously was not very happy about what happened. So he only saw one open window on the building, and he figured out that it had to be from that window. So he went up asking for explanations to whoever had thrown the statue into his head. And when the lady opened the door, it was love at first sight. They fell in love and they did got married. So you see, this is a true story. Saint Anthony did help the lady to find a husband, you see. So let's go this way. Just follow me. We are getting a little bit claustrophobic. Tourists. Not that we don't like, but we were not prepared for this big increase all of a sudden. It was very quick, you know. Santinha, bless you.
Why is that so? Why has there been a sudden boost in tourism?
Well, for very important reasons. First, still is not expensive Portugal. Prices are still quite affordable. Then, you don't hear about attempts. There's no terrorists so far. Pickpockets, yes, but that is everywhere, right? And with the instability mainly in traditional countries that would receive lots and lots of European tourism, like Tunisia, Turkey, Morocco, Egypt, all those countries around there, people are diverting their attentions into Spain and Portugal. So the Iberian Peninsula is receiving this tourists that used to go to other places. And now also Americans have discovered Portugal, because for them Portugal was just a city in the Iberian Peninsula that belonged to Spain. And now they discovered finally that it's not just a city and it does not belong to Spain. It's a full country. Okay.
Is it because of Fatima too?
Well, this year also Fatima brought many more tourists, because, and even non-Catholic people are curious to go to Fatima to see Fatima. Lots of people. You cannot imagine the amount of requests that this year we had for all kinds of people from all different kinds of religions. Many out of curiosity, some others just for religious purposes, but it's a fact. We had, during the visit of the Pope on the 13th of May, it was really crowded, really crowded. And there were no availability on flights, no hotels, no buses, no guides, nothing. Everything was taken, everything. Others are coming. Yeah, oh, we have most of the people here. So, in this section of the transept, you know, across us on the other side you have two stained glass windows. They are modern, they were made already in the 19th century. After the earthquake, we restored what had been damaged in the cathedral, and so all the stained glass windows were broken during the earthquake. So we have those over there that represent, on the left-hand side, Saint Vincent, the official patron saint of the city of Lisbon, and on the right-hand side we have Saint Anthony, the patron saint we celebrate, the popular one. But if you ask anyone in Lisbon who's the patron saint of the city, everybody will tell you Saint Anthony. We are preparing already, and we're going to see in Alfama as we walk down along this area, you're going to see already all the decorations and the preparations for the festivities of Saint Anthony. They last more than a month. They will start now by the end in these last days of May. They go all along the month of June, and then they will end in the beginning of July, okay? And together with Saint Anthony, we also celebrate in June Saint John, the 24th, and Saint Peter, the 29th. So June is the month of what we call the popular saints. And there's always a celebration somewhere in Portugal, okay? There's always one place that celebrates one of these three saints, always. And the fact is that, you know, if you ask, no one remembers Saint Vincent. And yet Saint Vincent was declared as patron saint of the city in 1147, when the first king of Portugal, Afonso Henriques, conquered the city of Lisbon. So Saint Anthony was not even born in those days. So actually, Saint Vincent was one of the martyrs of the Roman Emperor Diocletian. He was killed